Finally, the day has come to be able to talk about Hitman World of Assassination on PSVR2, and for me, it feels like there's a lot weighing on this video, so please get comfy as we have quite a lot to go over. Firstly, the developers told me there won't be any early access for the VR version or keys going out before the release, which means reviews on launch day are pretty much impossible, but you're probably going to see some live streams, and this is because this new VR version is just an update to Hitman World of Assassination and not a new release. So if you already own Hitman World of Assassination, this is like a £10 upgrade. So I travelled to Denmark and spent 2 hours playing the new VR version of Hitman, and I think I did enough experimenting to make sure what I'm about to say regarding the third or maybe fourth attempt to bring this colossal IP to VR is as accurate and in-depth as possible for you guys. Now before I get into the thick of the details, I first want to share how it actually just felt playing it, and especially how I felt afterwards. For me, this is without a doubt the best VR version of Hitman I've played to date, and secondly, it's the most fun I've ever had playing Hitman in VR period. And I'm pleased to say it wasn't just the nice graphics and bad interaction laughs that kept me in the headset. For the first time, I genuinely didn't want to stop playing. So let's get into some technical details, and if you find this video helpful, please take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe for more VR content. This sort of thing helps the YouTube algorithm see that this video might actually be worth someone's time, and Hitman is a big IP and it may help bring some more people into VR. So first I'm going to talk about the performance and the visuals, and I'm 99% certain Hitman is in fact using 120Hz reprojection, but before you let out a sigh, it's also using eye tracking in combination with dynamic foveated rendering. And aside from a couple of moments where I noticed some ghosting, I think Hitman looks absolutely phenomenal on PSVR2. I'm talking jaw on the floor on some of the levels that I saw, and the frame rate is absolutely rock solid. To test the frame rate, I went into the nightclub level in Berlin and let off some rounds in the middle of the dance floor, and I was rewarded by seeing hundreds of NPCs trying to exit out the same door, and it was one of the most impressive VR moments in VR for me of all time. Unfortunately, they didn't let me capture my gameplay while I was there, they just gave me this B-roll, but I wish they would have let me record it because it was just brilliant to see. Next, we need to talk about the pros and the cons regarding VR ports. Big budget games like Hitman have so much detail put into them, and I don't mean to keep going on about the visuals, but when I was in this game I could have simply just walked around looking at stuff, listening to the world and people's conversations going on all around me. It looks absolutely pin sharp, and the colours of the PSVR2 OLED panel just make it extra sweet to stop and look at. So now's a good time to discuss some pretty big changes in comparison to all the other VR versions, and there is some decisions that I absolutely was not prepared for, even with the developer telling me what to expect before I started playing. Now I say big changes because I don't want to call them improvements right now, till I've played the game some more, and I'm not entirely sure how you the viewer will feel about them, so please let me know what you think about them in the comments. Firstly, Hitman VR for the first time uses a third-person perspective during some key moments, and I have to say, I actually don't hate it, even though I fully expected to when the developer told me about it. When you climb or perform actions like blending in with the kitchen staff by stirring a pot, you are switched to a third person mode, which means you can move the camera closer or further away and in 360 around Agent 47. And it was a little jarring at first, but overall I actually think it kind of works well, because it gives you an opportunity to step back and appreciate the game's world, and it gives you a moment where you can literally step back and have a look at the situation and plan your next move. Switching back to first person, you have a torso and arms but no legs, and personally I never noticed this while I was actually playing, so honestly I don't really feel this is much of an issue. The legs do however reappear and disappear thankfully while you transition from third person to first person, but again these moments only happen in certain scenarios, and in my experience it's climbing and blending into the environment is the only time that I saw the third person camera in action. Melee attacks unfortunately still don't feel all that satisfying and remain more like a comical moment, but it is definitely more accurate than it has ever been, especially on PCVR, making slapping folk pretty awesome but still gamey feeling. Next we need to discuss interactions, because in all the other attempts to bring Hitman to VR, it's the interactions that have always proven to be the biggest flaw, and we still have a slightly similar situation here. But unless IOI created a Hitman VR game from the ground up, this is so far the best compromise regarding a VR port so far for the series. Firstly, this version of Hitman was like playing a excellent VR mod with some good 6-off interactions, which means it is close to a full VR experience, and the best way I can describe my experience with it is you have to give yourself to the game. If you try and play Hitman like a fully built from the ground up VR game, you'll experience some clunkiness and a bit of confusion. The game has its own way of doing things, which luckily isn't too far from being what we normally have to do in most VR games. At first I was very skeptical, but when a game looks this impressive, you can't help but want to experiment, and after I would say 10 minutes or so, I was playing the game fine, and I actually had a really good time, as I said earlier. All the interactions are still technically button presses, but it's a good mixture of hand gestures and buttons that actually make sense for VR. For example, if you reach out and grab something like a freezer lid to hide a body, you are still pressing a button versus grabbing a physical lid. But this time, instead of pressing B like in the old games, you'll be pressing the grip button and gesturing to open the freezer, so it's kind of meeting you halfway. So yes, it is still a button press, and everything does have an annoying interactive icon. But since now you have to gesture to the item and then press grip, for example, it actually feels okay. And that's what I'm most grateful for in this new VR version. And the biggest upgrade with this VR port is definitely the weapons. They are a massive improvement, and I'm going to get to them in a second. Back to the physical interactions, let's use strangling someone and hiding a body as an example of the buttons and interactions that you'll be expected to use. You approach a person, put your hands around their neck by pulling the L2 and R2 triggers, hold them till he goes down. You have to crouch by clicking in the right stick and use the grip button while pointing at the correct part of the body with the icon. And luckily the icon hitboxes are pretty large, so when you do a physical reach down to grab the body, it actually feels okay. Keeping the grip button held, you can then drag the body and approach a dumpster or a freezer, grab the interactive point of the lid, and then press the grip button again and lift, and this will automatically toss him in like a blacked out animation. At first it does feel a bit cumbersome, and I do wish that it didn't black out and you did see the body go in, and I was hoping to physically be able to throw the bodies in myself, but that's simply not going to happen. And while writing this, I'm not sure how you feel about hearing my feedback, because to me it doesn't sound great. But as I said earlier, after I was playing the game how it wanted to be played, it's soon become the norm, and I would argue, since all of these are gesture based interactions like opening doors by pushing them or turning on taps by touching them, versus previously having to press X or B, I think it's a definite improvement for the VR port. What we have here, at least for me, is enough for me to get used to the system and, more importantly, enjoy the game. On one hand, you do have some janky animations, but on the other hand, you have a game that looks insanely good and has hundreds of hours of replayability. And if I was a fan of Hitman on the flat screen, this VR port would absolutely blow my mind. The weapons look fantastic too and are fully interactive and satisfying to use, but they do still have a slight clunkiness to them, and even though the weapons feel solid against some objects in the world, they are not solid to each other or you. In other words, you can pass your hand through them or pass the weapons through each other. Good news is you can now eject a clip at the press of a button, grab another one from your hip, load it, cock it, and overall it feels fine. I don't want to say it feels great, but I think this time it's actually serviceable, and you can holster your pistol or pistols in your virtual holsters and store a larger weapon on your right shoulder. The PSVR2 adaptive triggers are also put to good use. You can half pull the trigger to aim with a laser, for example using an SMG or a pistol, or alternatively while you're sniping, if you half pull the trigger it allows you to hold your breath. In regards to haptics, I don't remember experiencing any headset haptics, but the controller haptics were great. To throw items, you can either look at something or someone and throw it using the eye tracking for a decent aim, or if you pull the L2 trigger you'll be greeted with an aiming arc. So if you wanted to say throw a penny to an exact spot to distract a guard, this is the best way to do it. You can actually simply just throw stuff, but it's very hit or miss if it will actually work and land where you want it to. Now I'm not sure if these updates will come to PCVR, the developer didn't want to comment on this, but I would assume that these updates will come at a later date. Now personally I think this update has been funded by Sony, but it would be very strange to see all this hard work not be implemented into the PCVR version at some point in the future. Collecting items is done by simply grabbing an object and placing it on your chest, and removing an item is done by grabbing your chest and using a menu system to select what you want to use, either by pressing down on the joystick or by grabbing the object with your opposite hand. So that's a lot of information, I understand, but to summarise, this has been the best VR Hitman experience I've had to date. And we have to remember, this is a port, and as ports go, I think they've done a really decent job. And for fans who enjoy Hitman, they will definitely appreciate this brand new perspective that VR gives them. You are Agent 47 more than ever, and it makes you want to experiment more than ever too. So for me, if anyone's wondering if this is worth a purchase and you have a PSVR 2, for me this is a day one purchase. Sure, I would love to actually have a true VR Hitman game, but for now, the trade-offs with what the developers have done for this VR port are absolutely absolutely fine by me, and I really can't wait to play some more on March the 27th. So that's all I've got for you today. I hope this video has been helpful. Please remember to leave a like and subscribe for more VR content, and I'll see you all down in the comment section.